Okay, let's think about how we're going to get some data into our database just to test our functionality that we're going to add is working as we want it to. Now, these services are typically developed independently of the other services, which means we don't need our auction service to be able to develop and make sure it's working for our search service. But we still need some data in our database to be able to test to see if we can search as we'd expect to. So we want our seed data from our auction service, but put it directly inside this database. And one way we can do that, because we know that we can get our seed data via Postman from our auction service, that's exactly what we'll do. So I'm just going to head over to Postman and let's take a look and get all of the auctions from our earlier request. I'll click send. And this is going to give us our list of 10 auctions. I'm just going to Control A, Control C, copy all of the results into my clipboard, head back to VS Code, and inside Solution Explorer, inside the search service, I'm going to add a new folder called data. And inside here, I'm going to add a new file. And what do I want for JSON data inside here? Custom file. And I'm going to call this auctions.json. And I'm just going to paste in the auctions from my clipboard. So we've got some JSON data now that we can use to populate our Mongo database. So let's close all of this stuff down. And I'm just going to right click the data folder and add new file. This is going to be a class and call it DB initializer. And let's see what we want to add in here. First of all, I'm just going to go across to the program class inside the search service, and I'm just going to take this code and cut this into my clipboard. And inside our DB initializer class, I'm going to create a public static async task that's not going to return anything, and I'm going to call it initDB. And this is going to take the web application app, just as we did for the auction service. And I'm just going to paste in what I have inside my clipboard and just import what we need to as the using statements inside here. So I'll just need to do the same for MongoDB client settings. And instead of builder, we'll just use app.configuration to get hold of the configuration here. So I've just pulled this out of the program service, so that's no longer in existence here. And we've just added it inside our DB initializer class. So we need to check to see if we already have some items in our database. And the way that I'll approach this is I'll just get a count and say var count equals await db.count async, and then specify the type of the collection that I'm interested in, which is items in this case. And currently, that would be 0 because we have no documents of type item in our MongoDB database. And I'll check to see if the count is equal to 0. And if it is, then I'll just add a console.writeLine and just say that there is no data, will attempt to seed. And then we'll get the data from our JSON file. And this is just a temporary solution, by the way. What I'm doing here with adding this data from our auction service, we'd probably need a better solution. And I'll explain why when we get to that point. But for now, consider this just a very temporary solution. So I'm going to call this item data equals await and file and say read all text async. And we want to get this from data and auctions.json. And I'll just create some options for the JSON serialization and say new var options equals new JSON serializer options. And we just want to say here that the property name case insensitive equals true. You'll probably get away with not doing this because the formatting inside the auctions.json should be accurate because we've just got it from Postman, but just in case, I've added it anyway. And we're going to say var items equals JSON serializer, and we want to deserialize this into a list of item. And we'll pass in the item data, and we'll pass in the options as a second parameter. So this effectively, this line here is going to take that JSON formatted document and effectively convert this into a list of items in .NET format. And then we can say await db.save async and pass in the items. Now what should happen if we restart our search service is that we should populate our MongoDB server with those items. And I've got the option, do I want to restart the app? I'm going to say yes. And let's see, do I see any information about seeding? No, I do not. And the reason for that, of course, is that I took the database initialization out of the program class, but then forgot to add it back in again. So let's put this inside a try catch block, just in case we get some issues. And I'm going to say await db initializer and initdb and just pass through the app. And if we do have an exception, then I'm just going to say console.writeLine and just pass E, and I just need to define that variable and say exception E inside the catch there. Okay, this time then, if I restart the app, and let's just stop it and clear the window and say .NET Watch, what we should find is that we see the console writeLine that says we're going to attempt to seed the data. Now we don't see any errors, so that means we have not had an exception. So that means, or should mean, that we now have some documents in our document database. And I'm just going to right click and refresh the SearchDB here for the MongoDB view. And take a look, and we can see that we now have 10 documents inside here. And what we can see, and don't panic if you see an error from your C# extension, because for some reason this particular extension makes the C# extension freak out a bit. But we'll see. Oh, well, at least it did in testing, but for some reason it's not doing it now I'm recording. And sure enough, previously I was seeing a nasty looking warning on the bottom right hand side here, and this would cause it to freak out a bit. But anyway, it hasn't. But what we can see is that we've got the ID field, and this is populated with the ID that matches, or it should match the ID that we had in our auction data. And then we've got all of the information about the auctions in each of these different documents. It has a different item, which is exactly what we're looking for. So now that we have some data, what we'll take a look at next is creating a controller so that we can retrieve the data from our MongoDB database.